What's up, internet gremlins? All y'all sitting on the YouTubes right now doing the thing. Got a special video coming for you today that's not that special or interesting, but whatever, you're here. First thing, we're gonna hang this little cheap neon sign I got off Amazon for like 20 bucks. Little crust repair sign. That's not that interesting, but the second thing we're gonna do is talk a bit about buses and driving them long distances / a lot / checking a lot of miles, daily driving, all that jazz. Because I think a lot of people out there don't drive their buses that much or their vintage classic Volkswagens. And they should, because that's one of the most enjoyable part of owning one. And I think a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, I think some people, I don't know what most people do, but some people I think are a little bit scared to drive their bus because they don't want to break down and they don't trust to drive very far. You know, I've heard some people say, wow, the farthest I've driven my Volkswagen is, 30 miles away from home, yada, yada. And as somebody who has driven their Volkswagen a lot and typically tacks on around 20,000, sometimes 30,000 miles a year on air-cooled vehicles, whether it's bugs or buses, I can say you will make it, and chances are you won't break down, but there's a lot of things you got to do, and there's a lot of things you got to do to make sure that your car's ready to go. And this is not going to be a super educational video to the fullest. If you're going to be looking up specific motor specs or specific things to do to your cars, that's not this video. It's more about generalness. That's a terrible word. It's more about the generality, like the concepts behind things on what you should do to your vehicle to be able to road trip long ways, not the nitty gritty detail. Maybe we'll do a deep video about that later, but this is more broad stroke, big brush strokes, not small brush strokes, but there'll be some small brush stroke stuff. So we're going to start with hanging this sign and some good coffee. Shouts out to my sister for these super cool mugs. She makes them, does not sell them. So I don't know why I'm telling you guys this. Anyways, alrighty, and my dog is still here and still barking. Hang the sign on the top. Nice little cheeky little thing, so pretty nice. Still gotta fix this leak. That's on the list. It's just been wet, rainy, and I haven't had many hands over to get up on the Quonset roof, which is kind of sketchy to do solo. So yeah, I really gotta get that going. That's not great. It adds texture. I'm gonna throw this stick for my dog. Hey. Okay, I'm gonna do my best to mentally have this make sense. But in my years of owning Volkswagens, I have driven lots and lots of miles on them. Lots. And in those miles, I have been through a lot of different engines and learned a lot of different things. For me, the goal of owning a bus was always to drive the bus and, camp out of it and whatnot. So my Volkswagen journey began after I had a couple other older cars. I started, with a 1990 Econoline because I wanted to live the van life, and it made sense for my work as a traveling filmmaker and whatnot. And I was always gone, so I thought, renting a place was kind of silly at my lifestyle, so I ended up buying, a couple vans, and then ended up falling in love with just the interior build process. And from there, I eventually arrived at a Volkswagen. My first Volkswagen was very similar to this. And I ended up falling in love with the Volkswagens. And at the time, I was living out of that. So I spent the whole summer after I bought it, getting it all cozy inside. I was actually an idiot at the time and didn't, I think it takes a while in your Volkswagen career to kind of, or at least it did for me, to arrive at originality as something to be championed. But, it had its, old sundial camper interior, and I ripped that out, which was a mistake looking back on it now, but what do you know? at that time. But anyways, I lived out of that and I tacked on a lot of miles that year. And that's kind of where, my understanding of reliability was shaken. Because in my vintage cars before, I had some old Fords, like I mentioned, they were a little more reliable and I didn't learn how to work on them. But then I got my Volkswagen and I learned that I had to work on them because it was the only way that I was going to be able to affordably do it. And I also learned that not every motor is created equal. And that, in my mind, is one of the biggest things for reliability. And that's going to be my main topic of point, is motors and getting the correct one and the lessons I've learned from that. Do not buy a GEX motor. That's my first advice. Okay, for all you guys watching, you guys are crooked. Okay, for all you guys watching, this is take 2. You don't know that. But I'm gonna start simply, because I was just rambling. It was gonna become very long-winded. So I'm starting over. Reliability, that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about driving your buses, or bugs, or any vintage air-cooled Volkswagen, or maybe a Porsche, super far distances, driving them daily, taking them on road trips, actually driving the cars as they would have been back in the day. So we're gonna start with engines. It's very, very important to have a good engine, to have a good powerhouse. And to me, there's a couple keys that go with that. One, making sure the engine is built right. There's a lot of temptations floating around on the internet for cheap engine builds. Don't do them. Stay away from those. Anything on Facebook and Craigslist is gonna be probably a sketchy situation. You don't wanna buy the random guy who's just selling a It took me many thousands of miles. They're both still running. One of them is in my old 67 who my friend June, who you guys might have seen, who did the sign painting on my bus, still drives. It's probably got 50,000-ish miles on the motor, and it's still ticking away, running great. He drives it not as much as I did, but he still drives it a good bit. He road trips around and lives out of the bus when he's in the US, and it's a great motor. So Jeff, great stuff. But there's other good motor shops out there that will build you a great motor. But you want to make sure that they're actually going to build it and blueprint it and balance it and just do everything to spec and have a dialed motor. Because parts these days are definitely questionable, and it becomes hairy on whether or not you're going to get a quality build. So finding someone reputable is key. Then after that, I would say make sure you go for a relatively stock motor. There's a couple upgrades that I would do that are great, but I say no to big motors. Again, there's tons of opinions out there, and honestly, who the fuck knows what I know? I could be totally giving bad advice here. But I drive my buses a lot, and I think that what I have to say might be somewhat useful to someone out there. But stay away from big motors. I think small motors, I love a 40 horse. I love a 1600 single port. I really don't go much bigger than a 1600 single port. I've had issues with dual ports for one reason. A 1600 dual port's a fine, dandy motor. I'm sure it's gonna be good. You know, my 1699 that I'm telling you about, or that I told you about, can you talk? That I told you about that was in that bus that June owns was a dual port. But I had a lot of issues with one specific thing. The seals on the intake manifold, the little rubber ones that go from the cylinder heads to the actual intake where the carb goes, they crack, and they can be such a pain, especially if you're tacking a lot of miles on there. They just don't hold up. The rubber we're getting nowadays just is not as good. So I stay away from dual ports for that reason. If you don't want to get a vacuum leak that's going to cause issues, that's going to be a pain to fix, and at very worst, is going to burn up valves and cause damage to your heads or cause you to blow a piston, whatever, don't go dual port. Go single port. Sure, you don't have the fancy new dual port, but the single port has a lot of torque and plenty enough power to push around a bus at somewhat modern speeds. So, stay stock. Do that. The next piece of advice that I have, if you're going to be driving these a lot, is pay attention to what goes on top of your long block. The quality of tin, the quality of carburetor, the quality of distributor, and making sure all those match is very important. And it's commonly overlooked. A lot of people slap some random long block together and it just is mediocre and then it causes issues. I've done it too. Put a bad carb on there, something goes wrong and it causes other damage to the motor or whatnot. Put just as much care and effort as you would in your bottom end, into your top end, and also into finishing it into a turnkey. Putting on the quality tin and everything like that, making sure everything is matched to your motor. Now there's a couple of upgrades that I'm sure you guys have heard about that I do recommend for reliability. And that is the doghouse cooler is a big one. If you're running a 1600 platform and you're putting it in a bus, definitely upgrade to the doghouse cooler. It's going to really help, and for longevity, it's really going to help your motor run a bit cooler. So that's one of the upgrades. You know, people go to the generator to alternator upgrade, and that's a great upgrade as well if you're going to be running a power setup in your bus and things like that. So I really recommend that. I personally like generators for the look and the originality of the engine, but I've never had issues with alternators. They have been a really great platform and I found them to be reliable. Next thing that's kind of a controversial opinion, but I stay away from electronic ignition distributors. I don't like to run that system. I've had them when I had them on my big 1699 that I got back from Jeff. You know, I had the fancy space age gray distributor. I think it was a Magna Spark or something. And that thing went out so instantly, and it took me a while to figure out what the problem was because there is no obvious mechanical failure with electronic ignition. I have been running points pretty much since that, and I've had, well, not since that, I've run a lot of the Protronic stuff and also good quality distributor with good points, good condenser, and a good coil. And I haven't had any issues with the points in roughly 7,000 miles. So, really recommend getting good parts and running points. I like points too because if you do have an issue, typically you can fix it on the side of the road easily and be able to see what exactly happened. Now granted, to be fair, if you just want to have a points distributor or you have a Petronics throw in and you can just put points back in on the side of the road, that's totally fine. But I like to be able to just be like, oh shit, my bus is running poorly, open the cap, look at the points and be like, okay, my points are bad. So that's my little spiel on that. So just to kind of recap, you know, get a good motor, build it well, stay stock for the most part, and you're gonna be reliable. You're gonna be able to get thousands of miles. And then taking that a step further is do your routine maintenance. I know this sounds like an obvious one, but every 2,000 miles is what I do. I do an oil change, I do a valve adjustment, I inspect the motor thoroughly for any sort of issues, and then I also adjust my brakes, I grease my front end, and I kind of go through everything there and just make sure that my routine maintenance is good. And I stay up on that. The next thing for reliability after routine maintenance, and again, this is broad strokes. All these things you can find on the internet by Googling the Samba. There's plenty of way more knowledgeable people than I who have plenty of good information on the Samba. So after routine maintenance, another thing is just being a good listener and driver of your vehicle. What's it doing? Is it stumbling? Is it acting weird? Is there a new sound? If so, address those problems immediately because they're probably small initially. If left alone, they will become much bigger and cause a lot of reliability issues. The next thing that I say for reliability driving these far is to pretty much do everything to the car. If you're going to be driving this far, do new brakes, do new everything, because chances are this car has been neglected and not been driven much for the past 50 years or whatever it is. So things need to be done. So do everything there. Do your brakes, do whatnot, so that when you drive and hit down the road, you're actually ready to go down the road and go far. That leads into my next point. When doing any of this, be patient. I know it's tempting, and I've been there to just get your project running. But don't take it on the road until your project is absolutely everything buttoned up to the T, double knotted, laced up. You're ready to roll to across the country. Because then by the time you get that, it's maybe going to put you back another week, another 2 weeks. But your car is going to be actually ready to drive anywhere, and reliability is going to be huge. Next, speaking of brakes, one thing I do recommend if you're actually going to drive these and you've got a pre-67 car, so 66 and below, do a dual circuit master upgrade. These cars are great, and if you're going to be driving them a lot, not just the Sunday car shows, even if you're going to drive them to Sunday car shows, if your car is not a period concourse correct, having dual circuit is a great safety upgrade. You never know with these parts, and you never know what could happen to your brakes. So having a fail-safe that if you lose one brake, you're not losing all your brakes is super huge. I really like dual circuit master. So do that. Transmissions, talking about those real fast. I haven't had too many issues with transmissions. They're pretty robust. I mean, if we're going into the modern world with the automatic transmissions, it's a totally different story. But in the split window and early bug era, those transmissions are pretty robust. As long as you put a stock motor into them, you're not going to cause any issues. You can even run bigger motors. I mean, I know I've never done it, running like Type 4 motors can cause issues. But for the most part, transmissions are pretty solid. But that being said, there is a lot of issues that people can have problems with. Number one, if your reduction box is leaking, make sure to fix it and rebuild it the right way. Follow the steps online or watch a YouTube video. Do it right, be patient, and get that good. Do not let that leaky reduction box be neglected and burn out your bearings and everything there, because that's going to leave you on the side of the road. Same if you have CVs. A lot of guys, they got torn CV boots and they're out there and they're like, oh great, I'm driving. But don't, because you're going to need to fix that. I've had a couple friends call me up on the side of the road and be like, oh my God, my CV joint blew up. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And you know what? That was something they could have fixed by noticing right away in their daily checkups or weekly checkups when they just inspect their car that, oh my God, my CV boot's ripped. And they could have fixed that and not broken down on the side of the road. But for the most part, transmissions are chill. But for God's sake, please check your transmission fluid. That's something you should do. If you just purchased your vehicle, definitely check the transmission fluid. Hey, maybe even drain it and change it. But if not, and your transmission fluid is good, just check it every now and then. I check it every 2,000 miles with my routine maintenance, and it's great. It just lets me know that, okay, I'm not going to run out of gear oil, because that's the number one reason why these transmissions fail, is they're low on gear oil. So just do that. It's going to be pretty chill. And another thing that I will say is don't be scared to drive these things. That's kind of like my last little piece of advice, is if you've got all your mechanics in, lined up and whatnot, drive them. They're really fun to road trip in. It's something super duper special. Being able to behind the wheel, the split window, and the things that you learn from it, the force to slow down and everything, and just take life easy is something that I really like about it. I have one modern car, which is a Honda Pilot, and I never drive it because it's way more enjoyable to be behind the wheel of a split window or behind the wheel of any vintage air-cooled car. And for me, the point of owning these cars is to drive them. So I try to drive them as much as I can. On average, I put about, every other day, maybe 100 miles on my bus. And I love that. And a lot of people say, oh, you're beating it up, but I'm enjoying it. So if I could say anything to you guys out there, it's get a good, reliable motor that's built close to stock. Do the rest of your mechanics in your vehicle close to stock without, going too crazy over the top. It doesn't need to be concourse. And then get in your car and drive it. Enjoy it, And then, don't be scared. Because if you do happen to have an issue, the community of Volkswagens are very friendly. So if you break down in the middle of nowhere, chances are you're close to a Volkswagen person. So, anyways, that's my little video. Hope it makes sense. Thanks for watching, and tickle you guys later.